like this don't give up, this resilience. And I think that's something that, always I'm trying to teach my daughters that, like, I think that it's okay to fail, and that it's really difficult to fail, and that it's hard. And I know people don't like failing, and I don't like failing. But if you let the fear of that hold you back from ever doing anything, then you'll never do anything. So you have to get over that fear and put yourself out there. And, and actually 9 times out of 10 people are really supportive and are cheering you on and want you to succeed, want you to do well.
Hello, possibility seekers. It's me. I'm back. I've got a phenomenal guest. Her name is Liz Willetts. She is a badass from the UK. Let me tell you a little bit about Liz. She's the founder of Investing in Women, a female empowering job board and community helping family-friendly and forward-thinking employers hire professionals looking for fulfilling, flexible, and part-time work. What a concept. She is an experienced recruiter with over 17 years of experience, both in-house at one of the Big Four and one of the UK's largest recruitment agencies. Elizabeth, or Liz as we're going to call her, is also a mom to 2 daughters, Emily and Annabelle, and a Labradoodle called Dougal. I love Labradoodles. She is a passionate believer in the power of part-time and flexible work to retain women in the workplace and close the gender pay gap. Her debut book called Flex, a dynamic guide for anyone wanting to build a successful career on their terms, came out in January of 2025. Her website and her book will be linked in the show notes. Her podcast, by the way, I started listening to it. It's awesome. Work It Like a Mom. I'm obsessed. All right. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you. I love that I could just speak to you every day, Monique, because I literally speak to you and then leave feeling amazing. Yay! So thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Welcome. I do believe that you might be my first international guest. So I'm so grateful.
Exciting. Thank you so much for having me. I'll be, bringing the UK to the US.
That's right. We're going to double expose this thing. You're going to send it to Working Like a Mom. I'm going to send it to my badass women in the US, and they're going to be like, hey, who is this power broker in the UK we need to know?
Oh, thank you. And the same for you as well. And I think that's quite nice because actually we've been talking, and really everything I think that working mums and women in general is just feel and experience is universal.
I absolutely agree. It's timeless and it's universal. It's funny because I feel like I'm having a very similar conversation, with my friends today about how women are feeling in the workforce as we ourselves had 30 years ago. And part of me is gratified by that because, life is life and women are women. And part of me is saddened because I don't feel like we've made enough progress.
Yeah. I do feel that, because I do so many posts and people, I wish you'd been around when my kids were little, my children were little like 15 years ago. And I often think, I don't know how much, I think some things have changed. I think COVID was actually, as much as it was horrible at the time, and I had small children, so it was difficult. But since like hybrid is norm and hybrids, full-time, normal full-time. And, before that, everyone would have been going into an office 5 days a week. And now you only have to go in 3 and still be full-time. So that's good. But I think there has been a definite pullback on, part-time work. There has been people that were fully remote and now having to go back into an office, and a lot of them are saying 5 days a week. And I know there's been a lot of, scaling back on DE&I programs in the US recently, which has rippled to the UK.
Has it rippled to the UK? Tell us a little bit about that, because I don't think that people have quite the perspective that you have.
Yes, it's been interesting. It's been an interesting time because we've also had a budget as well at the same time. We had a new government that came in the UK in the summer, and then the Chancellor did a budget in October, and the budget included quite a few additional taxes and costs on employers, which has made employers nervous, and hiring has sort of pulled back since that budget. But then on top of that, obviously we've had Trump come in the US. There's been a scaling back on DE&I, and even we got a vacancy of DE&I vacancy on our job board, and they were nervous to call it that because they were worried about the political implications.
Wow. So it is really it's affecting across the pond as well, and that makes me even more sad.
Yeah. Because a lot of our, a lot of the big companies, big employees here are actually American.
Right, exactly. So I don't think that people really understand the ripple effect of a policy or a statement or an esprit de corps. It's like, all right, if this is the new way, I was just reading an article in the Wall Street Journal this morning that had me, talking about the same thing. It's like when you have this sort of command and control is what I'm calling it.
And we're all connected, aren't we? Like these employers are global employers. So, if something happens somewhere, everything's global now, isn't it? Whether it's big company supply chains, anything, and just has to be something happens somewhere and it does affect everybody else. We've seen obviously that, haven't we, with Russia and Ukraine and what happened with gas prices and, and that obviously had a massive effect.
Right, exactly. Well, back to our regularly scheduled program because I could talk about that forever, but I'd rather talk about you. Uh, it's your journey. You're a podcaster. You're an owner, a business owner, an entrepreneur. You're a consultant. You do all of these things. Can you tell us about how you got through this process and ended up where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been quite driven. I think I've always been an entrepreneur at heart because I remember as a kid, my nanny had a shop. My nanny ran a printing shop, and it was very unusual in those days for women to own businesses. So I remember she split up with my granddad. She tells the story that she couldn't get a mortgage in the 1970s, even though she was like the earner because you needed a male signature. So she really had to like claw her way, to any sort of sense of like being a business owner, etc. So she managed to get this printing shop, and then I remember as a small child helping her in the printing shop on a Saturday, and so she's always been a really real inspiration to me. She employed a lot of local women, a lot of mums part time, etc. And then as a child, we would do like sweet stalls at the end of the drive, and yeah, and go around our neighbours, seeing if they wanted little jobs doing for money. So I think that's always been in me. And then started in recruitment, really lucky that I literally didn't really know what recruitment was, but I just saw a job advert on a website that we have in the UK for graduates, and it said, "Come work in the city, and you can earn up to £30,000 in your first year." And I was like, "That sounds amazing." I just want to make like lots of money and work in London because I wasn't from London. I'm from up, in the north of England. So I went down and I just loved it. It was probably even now like the best year probably my life. It was just so much fun. We were making a lot of money, lots of deals. I was going into like these amazing offices because I was recruiting accountants into like big investment retail banks in London. Like I've never seen such beautiful offices, and they'd give us tours and things like that. And then we were there a year, and then I won a trip. They called them Platinum Places trip for like the biggest villas. So I was like really lucky to get on this trip to Monte Carlo in my first year of recruit, which was amazing. But while we turned the news on, and then it was like Lehman Brothers has crashed.
That was the year that Lehman crashed?
Yeah, it was that weekend, and everyone was like, "Oh no, the party's over." Literally, the party's over. So we all came back from Monte Carlo, very different mood to how we'd all got out. And then recruitment was tough, but I stuck it out, and there's been ups, downs, all sorts in between in recruitment. And then I eventually moved in house, left agency, moved in house in 2015, went and worked for Deloitte, which is one of the big four. It's one of their in-house recruiters. And then had two children during that time. And then I was made redundant when I was about to come back from second maternity leave, and couldn't get another part-time job. And I really wanted part-time because my eldest is an IVF baby. I'd really struggled to have children, so I just didn't want to go back at that point full-time. I couldn't find anything part-time, and I could see we had quite a lot of flexible working type influencers on Instagram in the UK at that point, but none had like got a recruitment background. They were sort of shouting about it and doing a lot to raise awareness, which was brilliant. I couldn't really see anyone that had the recruitment background that was trying to do something. So I thought, well, I've got all this recruitment experience. I'll give it a go. So I got a £5,000 redundancy payout, probably about $8,000, and just found a developer who built me this job board like on the cheap, and like away I went. And that was it, really. That was June 2021.
Wow, happy almost anniversary. That's big. That's huge. You know, it's funny, I had the similar experience. I started my business with a small payout, and it was like, okay, in those days, we had to get a fax machine and a phone.
Yeah, I got like a secondhand laptop and it was fine. And you know what? I like, and I'm really proud that we've never had to take funding. We've always been like self-funded. I started the business, just me, made the sales. The business has just grown through sales. And actually, I'm really proud of that.
You should be. You absolutely should be. That's huge. Word of mouth is everything in our I mean, when you're providing a service and not a product, all you have is your reputation and your brand is built on reputation and your word. So if your word and you know what I mean? It's all connected. And so my question is, how did you help this is a question I just wanted to understand better is you had you identified a need. Women wanted to work part-time. They weren't being served. And yet you also had to do some what I call missionary work to explain to the employers how that value would play out. So how did you go about doing that? Because that's harder.
That's the hardest thing, and that is still the hardest thing. And sometimes it gets harder, when the DE&I initiatives roll back. So it is just banging that drum, really. That and the people that do hire staff on a flexible basis are then evangelical about it. They're really bought in, and they say how it's so beneficial for employees. And I'll give you a story, and some people might not like this, but I hired somebody, a marketing manager, to join my team, and she joined in September. And I remember putting the advert together in July time, because that's when we were recruiting. And my husband said, "Why don't you hire somebody full time?" And I said, "I don't think I will get much more out of somebody if they work full time or part time, because I know every single part-time person I've worked with are much more productive than full-time employees, because they just don't waste a second." Like, I remember when I was in recruitment in the agency days, the highest biller in our team was the person that worked part-time. And that is a true story, because she was like a machine. She came in, she didn't really talk to people because she was just working, and we would just be messing about, going to the kitchen, making endless cups of tea. Where she was like 4 days a week. She knew she had to leave by a certain time to do nursery pickup, so she didn't waste a second. And that is like, you actually, as an employer, it's better value for money, because you tend to get similar ish levels of output, if not the same, as a full time member of staff. But you can pay less, and people don't like that, because part time, people feel they're being taken advantage of. Because I posted something like that on LinkedIn. But I also think it has to be an attractive proposition for an employer to say, actually, I will take someone part time because of X.
Well, first of all, I would say that it would be a little bit hypocritical for the woman who's espousing part-time, advocacy to hire full-time. That's number one. So I would have said that to my husband. But you're right. I had said when I was starting the business and I needed to hire, and I think the best career advice I was given, one of the best career advices I was given was hire before you're ready. But hire a competent mommy tracker. We used to call them mommy trackers. Somebody who's really smart that doesn't want the full-time job, that doesn't want a big commute, or that doesn't want an in-office situation or environment. And my first part-time person was somebody who lived 2 miles from my house, had a phenomenal marketing background, wanted to work with me because she liked me and she liked the work that I was giving her, and I didn't care what hours she worked.
I'm like that. And then people like working for you. And then actually, if you offer that, like you said, you can actually attract a better quality person. And you can, especially if you're remote as well, you can hire somebody, I mean, theoretically from anywhere in the world, but, certainly anywhere in the country.
Well, right now, this is the first time this has happened to me, but I have a project manager who is in Portugal, and I have a data analytics person who is in Morocco. I'm your poster child, Liz Willetts. So that's awesome. All right, so it is a lot of work to get these businesses to understand the value. And once they do, are they like, okay, give me more?
Yeah, once they do, they're like, this is amazing because they are getting like really dedicated staff, often, often overqualified staff because we know that there's a lack of flexible part-time positions. So they are getting people, that maybe wouldn't necessarily take that role if it was full-time, but because it's part-time, it can offer what they want. They're like, really keen. And therefore they're able to grow their businesses as well and not pay either a full-time salary. So we work a lot with startups as well, smaller businesses that can't afford or don't have quite the workload yet for a full-time member of staff. And that's really rewarding because then as that business grows, as that person's circumstances change, that role develops. They're really good, rewarding roles that we work on. And then we work with, we work with big corporates as well. So we work with a whole range of organizations and big corporates that know that they need to hire more women. And then we advise them on the different ways that they can attract more women to their organization, how to make their company appear more inclusive, improve their employer brand, etc.
Yeah. So what are the trends that you're finding? Well, now I know we talked about the retrenchment of DE&I, which, you know, has its own issues. And at the same time, what are you hearing from the women that are your candidates? I want to get the buy and the sell side.
I mean, gosh, we get inundated with messages from women all the time, and we tend to get inundated, particularly when an employer has said everyone's back 5 days a week, or they walk out like, "Oh my god, my employer!" And then we're hearing a lot where they're really monitoring it now. Employers with chat, checking their passes on the on the computer where like they're looking at where IP addresses are, and it feels a bit Big Brother, and people are not liking that. It's completely the trust has been completely broken with the employee and the employer, and when that trust is gone, that trust is gone, and you're never ever going to get the best out of a member of staff if that member of staff doesn't feel trusted or autonomous in their work.
I wish it's so funny. Yeah, there's a particular client that we have, and the new CEO is like monitoring and basically told the staff, assume no privacy in any of your communications.
Yeah, I just don't. You're not going to get the best at you. You're not going to get someone that's happy to come to work, that wants to do well, that wants to do well for your company, that is bought in. You're not going to get any of that, are you?
I'm like, why would you do that? How do you feel? You're being treated like a child. My attitude is if you have work to be completed by certain dates and you get it done, I don't care if you're on the beach, as long as you get it done and it's good quality work and it's on time and it's on budget and it's all of the things that we just discovered or just determined and decided. Why do I need to micromanage you like a child?
I think there's some insecurities, isn't there? There's insecurities, I think, for like middle managers that are getting that message from senior managers. And I think there's probably been some people that have ruined it for the rest of everybody else. But those people would have ruined it whether they were working remotely or in an office. They probably weren't going to produce, good quality work. They were going to take ages because they were going to be messing about, not doing their work. So those, I think they, yeah, I think that's the problem, and then everyone's just fixated on those certain individuals that would have been no good anyway.
That's it. It's the emphasis on the 2% where you throw the baby out with the bathwater, as I like to say, right? It's just why are you allowing this minority, tiny, tiny little, but little tiny sliver of the entire population who would be garbage anyway, to ruin it for the 98% who are great? That yeah, it makes me a little crazy. So, what do you think holds women back in their journey to find meaningful part-time work? What are you seeing?
I think there's a lot of women just unfortunately lack confidence, and I think there's so many different reasons why women lack confidence. I think a lot of it goes back to childhood and schools, and women are brought up to be nice, to be people pleasers, and it's all that subconscious stuff that I know we've talked about before. So I think there's that, and this expectation as well. Like my daughter is a real perfectionist, and I see it in her at 7, and I'm like, and then if she makes a mistake, it's really bad. She's throwing her paper out, even if it's a little spot. And so then I think that can hold women back. And there's so many studies that show women only apply for jobs if they think they meet 100% of the criteria. Men apply if they meet 60%. I think some women are afraid to fail, and maybe men are a little bit more It's a very generalization. Men are a bit more risk takers and are happy if things not happy. Nobody likes to fail, but are willing to take that risk of failure. Whereas I think it's that, a lot of women, they're juggling so much, aren't they? It's like this thing at home, isn't it? They take on a lot and then they don't want to be seen to drop a ball. And actually, to take those steps up, it, it is a risk. You do put you put yourself out there, and that does require a certain level of confidence. And also, if women have been out the workplace for a little bit as well, that really can, even if it's just a short period of time. I think women, I speak to so many women that are really self-conscious about tiny career gaps, really, like a year career gap. They're very, very self-conscious.
So this is a great let's put a pin in that for a second and unpack it because I've heard this too. It's like, "Oh, I have a gap in my resume. I'm gonna look like I'm not a serious candidate, and they wax on poetic for, like, the next 10 minutes. What do you tell a woman who says, "I have a gap in my resume and I've been doing, whatever?"
Loads of people have gaps. I'm like, loads of people have gaps. I don't know many people who have like complete, finish one job on a Friday, start next job on a Monday. That's not really how it happens. People go traveling. A lot of people have been made redundant, unfortunately, and have spent time looking for work. People might have to take time out to care for people, care for loved ones that are unwell. Maybe you've had to take time out because you've been unwell. Most people will have, by the time they have had a 40-year career, will have had a few gaps in that career. So you're not alone, but I think women worried that it makes them appear less committed, less ambitious, um, and and that they're not like as career driven, or that they don't prioritize their work, which is not true. And actually, I think a lot of it, I see so many CVs where it feels like people are justifying a career break. And you don't need to justify everything, you need to put it on.
Okay, so talk as a recruiter, you have a professional opinion on how gaps in resumes should be treated.
I don't think they should put on, because you're drawing attention to it. If you're self-conscious about it, why would you draw attention to it? So it's like, if you I used to do like color analysis and personal styling years ago, and it would be like, if you're self-conscious about your tummy, don't put a belt around your tummy. It's a bit like that. Don't draw If you're very self-conscious, don't put a belt around it or a ribbon on it. If they see you've got a career gap and ask you about it, just tell them. It's it's not. And then I think that's it. Then that's the end of the conversation. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to apologize for it. Just explain what you were doing, and then the conversation moves on. They're much more interested, the hiring manager, in your work experience, what you've done, how that's relevant to the role that they're recruiting for, and what skills you're going to bring. Not that you've had a career break either recently or often. Sometimes they'll put it on like it was 10 years ago. I'm like, no one cares.
So I was recently at an event and it was called 212 NYC and it was for the advertising and marketing community. And the topic of the evening was your job is finding a job. And it was amazing to me the kinds of questions and feedback that we got from the audience and the just craziness. It's this notion that you can go on a job board all day long and actually be looking for a job. That's not how you look for a job. So elaborate a little bit about that. I just think there's so many just because we have technology doesn't mean I always like to say people hire people. You know who you have to speak to about that is people.
I mean, I've got a recruiter friend, and she's always like, if you wouldn't pay to put a stamp on it, and the stamps are expensive in the UK now, don't apply. Because we do get a lot. You can tell when someone's just like applying like willy-nilly, because they won't include cover letters. Their application doesn't seem, you can't see any relevance to the role. They often are applying, we'll get, because I can see all the applications that happen on our site. You can see they've applied for multiple different roles that aren't really related. So it's a waste of your time, more than anything. And then you get upset when you get the rejection emails. So I think you need to take a step back and start, thinking much more strategically about your job search. So actually, what do you want? That's obviously the first thing. What do you actually want? And then you'd be tailoring your entire strategy around that. So you'd be tailoring your CV, cover letters, which are not dead, because actually it shows an interest in that role, that you're not applying for 100 jobs that day. You'd be trying to connect with people in the industry you want to work in, the company you want to work in on LinkedIn, trying to set up some virtual coffees. You'd be focusing on offline networking at those events where those people might be. You'd be speaking to potential colleagues. You'd be trying to get introductions. This whole thing that goes around that. But if you're just thinking, I just want a job, any job, you haven't got time to do that. But if you actually start thinking, I want a career, you're going to be much more strategic.
Oh my god, seriously, Liz? You could have been me. You said everything I said. I was like, "You guys have got I would rather you triangulate on 5 key jobs and really go at it and prove to the company by virtue of how you communicate with all their executives, and you go after them on LinkedIn and offline and this and that and the other thing, than you do a half-assed job at 100."
Well, it's just not going to get you anywhere, especially in this market. It's really, really competitive. I mean, you might be lucky if you really just want any old job, you might get a job down at the supermarket. But if you actually want something that, you really, really want, then you're going to have to be a lot more strategic about it.
Talk to recruiters like yourself.
Develop relationships with recruiters, in-house and agency.
There you go. So the other thing is what you said, and you breezed over it because you're such a pro. You know this in your sleep. Is this idea of applying for multiple jobs at the same company that are disparate jobs? Like you cannot be an ops manager and a marketing manager and HR and whatever. That's like you look desperate, unfocused, and completely willy nilly, as you would say.
I don't know if you use the phrase willy-nilly. You might have to you might have to translate that.
What's the best career advice you've gotten?
I think like this, don't give up, this resilience. And I think that's something that, always I'm trying to teach my daughters that, like, I think that it's okay to fail and that it's really difficult to fail and that it's hard. And I know people don't like failing and I don't like failing. But if you let the fear of that hold you back from ever doing anything, then you'll never do anything. So you have to get over that fear and put yourself out there, and actually 9 times out of 10 people are really supportive and are cheering you on and want you to succeed, want you to do well. So I think there's that. There's also this idea of self-promotion. I think a lot of women, coming back to that, is that they think they do good work and they'll do good work and it will be recognized. And unfortunately, that is not always the case because everyone's so busy. Everyone's so busy in what they're doing. They can't, actually always turn around and recognize somebody else. So you can't, expect to get external validation all the time. And actually, you need to start documenting what you do. So then you can, you're self promoting. And then that's brilliant when it comes to pay rise, negotiating a pay rise, a promotion, applying for a new job, speaking to a lot of candidates, do these CV reviews as well. And so what was the impact of this project you did? I don't know. And I'm like, well, it would be so much more powerful if we could say what this impact was. So even if you're just doing something for a small period, if it's a large 2-year project and you're doing something, a bit of it for 6 months and you roll off onto something else, follow up with those people that delivered that project. So you then have something tangible that you can add to your brag book, if you like. To make sure you're following up. You want to make sure you're documenting all your achievements because then it's much harder for somebody to say no to a pay rise, a promotion, or a job offer.
Brilliant. That was a masterclass, by the way. That statement is the masterclass. We will make sure that that is one of your shorts for sure, because that's the point, ladies that are listening. I know men listen to my podcast, and I'm thankful for every single one of you, and I love you to pieces. But I don't think you have a problem asking for a raise. Apparently, you asked for 30% more twice as many times. So I'm pretty sure you got that loaded. But we do not, however. So that is the brag book, as Liz likes to refer to it. That is the thing where you keep all of the positive outcomes of your projects and your jobs and your all of it. The another woman who was at my retreat the last time said she keeps a running Word document of all the nice things that clients, because she's an entrepreneur, clients say to her about her.
I do that as well, actually. I've got a nice emails folder. So if you've had a bad day, I just read through that.
That's it. That's what she says. When I have a really bad day and I start to question myself or why I have my own business or why I'm why I'm on the planet, she opens that folder up and reads.
We should all have a nice emails folder or a Google Doc on the brag book.
That's it. Exactly. I started doing that on my website. I just put a page together and I was like, you know what? I'm going to start putting testimonials on this. So, when, whatever. What is the worst career advice you've ever been given or have heard someone be given?
I think there's a lot of people, are quite quick to leave jobs. I often feel that they have, they say they've had a bad day, and actually everybody has a bad day. So sometimes think, is it worth always like, and often there are toxic workplaces, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I think it's good to take a step back and think about the bigger picture and, are you jumping from one thing to another thing? So make sure that you know, really think about leaving a job, particularly at the moment with the market as it is. And, don't then, because I always find if you leave a job, you'd become a lot more desperate, obviously, in your job search. And then you just take something that might not actually be quite right. You're in a much better position if you are in a job looking for another job because you're less likely to take something that isn't quite right because you need to pay the bills. So that would be something. I think this whole you're going to be recognized for your hard work now, you might not. So so you need to learn how to self-promote and get more confident in speaking up. And I think that, I mean, there's so much, isn't there? And I think, I loved that Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg book, but there was a lot like how women had to change and how women had to become, more assertive, etc. And I think that was a shame because actually I think a lot of workplaces could do with becoming a little bit more feminine as well.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I wasn't a huge fan of the book. I thought it was well, I mean, I think she sold it because she has a brand and she has a name. Having said that, what you're describing is how I view things. And if you look in history, there's some really, really great examples of female leaders being super successful when they have this spirit of collaboration, of listening and giving everybody the opportunity to be seen and heard and understood. Seen, heard, and understood are the three things, right? One of the things that I talked about is the and it happened to one of my other podcast guests, is the given the advice of doing it just like Johnny. Johnny's our top performer. Do it just like Johnny. Whatever he does, do what he does. It's not going to work for me because I'm not Johnny. I can't be disingenuous and do the like, hey, let's go out for drinks. Let's go, babe, go. Like, I can't be a bro. I can't act like a bro. I can't be a bro. I'm not going to get the same clients as Johnny. I can't act the same way as Johnny because it's not my personality. I can be successful like Johnny, but I can't be like Johnny. So those are 2 it's a distinction with a difference. So I think that some of this, being more aggressive or being more assertive or being like a man, like I remember working at IBM and having to wear a bow tie, and I got called out. Oh, yeah. I got called out when I wore patterned stockings. I had to wear navy blue suits all the time, white shirt, don't wear pink. No, don't and literally got called out because I had really funky, cool stockings. They were like, "No, that's not gonna work over there." So the point is, okay, do I have to dress the way you tell me to dress? Yes, maybe in that context, but I don't have to act like everybody else. So there is, I think, for me, there when I hear people talk about job searches and stuff, and I did a speech a couple weeks ago, and one of the women said, I have trouble being my authentic self at work, and I unpacked it a little bit, and I said, look, authentic self, what does that really mean? I mean, if I go around on the weekends and be like, "Yeah, I'm always dancing." I mean, yes, maybe I wanna turn that down a little bit so I don't show up dancing in the workplace, or if I'm loud and boisterous and whatever, okay, but I can be myself within a professional context, So, I anyway, so finally, what if you had a chance to speak to your 30-year-old self, what would you tell her?
Oh my gosh, my 30-year-old self was so depressed because we were trying for a baby and it wasn't happening. So I remember crying on my 30th birthday. So I would just go back and give her a hug because I'm nearly 40 now. So this is like, it's 10 years ago. And I'd be like, actually, it works out. You do get the baby that you want. And I always think my daughter, like, I always say, I gave birth to her, but she gave birth to me because she completely changed me, everything about me. And I always say, I gave her life, but she gave me my life back. because I was like really depressed. So I know I'd just go back and give me a hug and actually say, you know what, you're nearly there. Because actually, I did fall pregnant when I was 31, so I was nearly there.
Well, I had a very similar journey.
Yeah.
I did. I gave birth at 32, but it took me 2 years to get pregnant, and I was sad about it all the time, and I had a daughter.
It's horrible. It's
It is.
horrible trying for a baby. I feel really, that's also something, I'm really passionate about because it's just, and people feel very alone during that time.
You are just an inspiration to so many. So what would be your last parting words that you want the audience to walk away with and be like, yeah, Liz, she put that last thought in my head and I'm really all about it. Like, is there anything that you haven't said?
I think you just got to go for things. I remember, this is still a story. Sorry. I remember listening to a podcast with Jenna Kutcher. Do you know if you know Jenna Kutcher's podcast?
Yes, I do. I listened to her. Yeah.
Yeah. And she had, I think, Dean Grazias.
Oh, I love. Oh, yeah. Yes.
You know who I mean, basically.
Yes.
A big famous person called Dean. And he was saying, yeah, you'll have to, it was years ago, this podcast though, she was saying, what if someone's listening to this and it was the same, and they really want to start their business because it's an entrepreneurial podcast, but they don't do it. What would you say to them? And he goes, this is what I would say. Imagine that you've lived your whole life. You've played it safe your entire life. You've stayed in a steady job. You've had a normal house. You've, played it safe, played it quiet. You die, you go to the gates of heaven. But, at one point in your life, you had an itch. You wanted to start a business. You wanted to take a risk, but you just didn't dare do it. You die, you go to heaven, and God's there waiting for you. And God turns around and said, oh, did you have a nice life? And you'd be like, yeah, it was all right. You sort of hesitate. And God would be like, why are you hesitating? And you'd be like, oh, well, I did have this thing that I did want to do one time, but, for whatever reason, I didn't do it. And God would be like, oh, I'm so sad you said that. It's like, oh, because if you had done that, let me just show you what your life would have been like. And it could have been like this incredible life. And I remember listening to this podcast. I was with my mum and I got like chills. And I was like, oh my God, that's like amazing. That shows, life's just too short for any of us not to try things. And mum was like, you've already done that, because I was so nervous about doing IVF. I nearly didn't do it. And mum was like, you already said yes. You said yes to IVF. If you'd have been, I said no. And that was like my biggest fear, to do IVF and it not work. And she says, and it's work. It proves that if you try your thing, it's your biggest fear, it can work and it can completely change your life. So that is what I just always carry with me now, that you've got to try, because it can completely change your life. So I'm like, yeah, everyone's got, if you've got an itch, whatever it is, you don't know, it could be the best thing you've ever done for you and your family, for future, the ripple effect could last for years.
Yeah, that's great. That is a masterclass too. It's like, you aren't going to make all of the baskets that you don't try for, or whatever that expression is, right?
So just try.
Like Nike says, just do it. This has been awesome. Thank you so much, Liz Willetts. This has been so much fun.
Thank you.
So you want to work like a mom, you want to work part-time, you want to try something new, just do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, be inspired by Liz's story, take it to heart, see that the success that she's had and the impact that she's having with other women, through other women. This is what we need to do. We need to amplify the possibilities. How appropriate. Thank you, possibility seekers. Remember to like, follow, and share this episode with your network and your friends and those people that you think need to hear this message. Thank you for being here. And as I always like to say, make it a great day. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening to Possibilities with Monique de Maio, where we unpack life as a female mover and shaker. If you like the show, please consider liking it, or better still, subscribing to it and leaving us a rating. It truly does help. Also, you can pick up my book, The 7 Secrets to Creating a Life You Love, a practical guide for women in leadership. You can find the book, other episodes of this podcast, and how to stay in touch at moniquedemaio.com. DEMAIO. I look forward to seeing you again soon. With gratitude, Monique.